Proceed.
The war is over. The rebels are countrymen again. Now, the war was not really over. Skirmishes continued to happen well after a peace treaty was signed to finally end the American Civil War. 4 bloody years of battle that tore this country apart. The man who said this quote was like his men, tired and weary, and was relieved to finally end the war in a meeting at Appomattox Courthouse on April 9th, 1865. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Frey. I'm a senior here, and I will be talking to you today about this meeting. I know none of you are actually in American history right now, but you will be, and I hope you enjoy this speech. So today, well, you might be wondering why I'm talking about this and what makes me qualified. Well, I've been studying history both in and outside of school for years, actually, and I have a particular interest in, among other things, the American Civil War. And last year, this meeting, we spent a day talking about this meeting, and I really enjoyed it, and it really stuck out to me, and I hope it sticks out to you as well. So today, I'll be painting a picture of what this place was like. And to do that, I'll be talking about what Appomattox Courthouse was, who met there, what happened there, and why it's so important to American history. So, what is Appomattox? Appomattox is a little teeny tiny town in central Virginia, about 100 miles west of Richmond, Virginia, which is the capital of the Confederate States. And had it not been for the American Civil War, this place would be relatively unknown, in my opinion. And especially for this building, Appomattox Courthouse. Appomattox Courthouse was owned by William McLean in the 1860s, and it's rather ironic that he owned it, because at the beginning of the Civil War in 1860, he owned a house in Bull Run, which is where the first battle of the American Revolution happened, and then he decided, nope, I don't want to be a part of this, and moved to Appomattox. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? Because in this building is where the peace treaty was signed. So, but like I said, it wouldn't be significant had these two generals not met here. There were 2 of them that met. And they were Confederate General Robert E. Lee and Union General Ulysses S. Grant. Now, who were they? Robert E. Lee was the Confederate general. This is him in the picture. He was the more senior general at 58 years old, and he was very well respected on both sides. And he was actually Lincoln's first choice to lead the Union Army, which comes as a surprise. But he could not tear his family apart and betray his family and friends, so he took up arms and took control over the Army of Northern Virginia. One thing I do want to point out, Lee did not agree with slavery. A lot of people think he did, and he did own slaves, but he actually didn't agree with slavery. And it was really hard for him to fight for the Confederate side as a result. Meanwhile, on the other side, we have Ulysses S. Grant. He was 43 years old, and one source that I read described him as young and scrappy. And I would add the description of new generation of general, actually. Now, Grant was Lincoln's 5th choice to lead the Union Army. Number 5, he was Lincoln's last resort. And he won the Battle of Shiloh, which is over in the west. I believe it's in Mississippi or something like that. And when he won the battle, Lincoln was like, hey, this guy can actually win this war for me. And he did. Now, Lee and Grant actually knew each other previously, kind of. It's kind of like, you know, you guys all have that one student in your class, or maybe someone like me, a senior, where you hear a lot about them and you see them walking around, but you don't actually know who they are. You've never actually really talked to them. That's the whole situation with Grant and Lee, because they fought on the same side during the Mexican-American War, and they kind of knew each other, but kind of didn't, and it was kind of awkward between them. And letters between the two leading up to this meeting, while Lee was on the run from Grant, did not help. Basically, Lee was saying, hey, hypothetically, if I were to surrender, which I'm not surrendering quite yet, what would your terms be? And Grant said, well, since you're surrendering, my terms are this, 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 and this. And Lee was like, hey, I'm not surrendering. Not yet. Well, Lee eventually did surrender. And when he did, they agreed to meet at Appomattox Courthouse at 1 o'clock that afternoon. Now, I'd like to bring up an image of Appomattox Courthouse, the parlor especially. Just for sake, we have Union generals on the perimeter, Union officers on one side, and Confederate officers on the other side of this room. And in the center, we have a table and a couple chairs. And that's where this meeting took place. Now, to paint a picture of what it actually looked like, here's actually an actual painting of the meeting. And you can see we have Grant and Lee in the middle, shaking hands and being all hunky-dory now. Well, it wasn't really hunky-dory, because when they walked in, they kind of sat down next to each other, across from each other, and they were like, hey, I know I've been trying to, well, not kill you, but I've been trying to beat you for the past 4 months, and how's your wife doing? That's kind of how it started off as. And the way they were dressed is rather comical as well, in my opinion, because Lee came in head high, with full dignity and pride, wearing his full dress uniform. His boots were shiny, his buckles were shiny, his buttons were shiny, and he had a sash and sword. He came in full dress uniform. Meanwhile, Grant came in wearing his scruffy boots, his uniform covered in mud, his beard a mess, his hair a mess. He looked like he just came off the battlefield. And he had, in a way. So they were very different people meeting here. Now there's something unique about this meeting, because after the awkward, "Hi, how's your wife doing?" meeting, Lee got sick and tired of the awkwardness and said, "Okay, give me the terms." And mind you, I'm also paraphrasing. Now, Grant handed him the terms, and they were really unique because typically in terms of surrender, the surrendering army loses their ammunition and horses, their cavalry. But Grant was tired, as everybody else was, and he also realized that pretty much all of these soldiers were yeoman farmers. Now, there's a huge stereotype idea that in the South during the Civil War, everybody lived on a 100-acre plantation with hundreds of slaves, and the white people did like no work. That's a lie. There was a minority actually owned plantations, and a majority lived on yeoman farms. They had maybe 1 or 2 slaves, but they did a lot of the work themselves. So for Grant to let Lee's men keep their arms and horses was very insignificant. 1, in rebuilding the country, and 2, just saving their pride, because they were all tired and they were all almost about dead, pretty much. So I think that's very significant of Grant and very admirable in him. So that's the beginning of the end of the Civil War. Now, I could go on and on about this. So you have over, I think it was about 50 years of Reconstruction, and there's 3 different types of Reconstruction. It's really confusing, and it's just mass chaos, and that's way too long to fit into this presentation. So, today, let's recap. Today we learned about Appomattox Courthouse, who met here, what happened here, and why it's so important to the American Civil War. And we also learned how Grant was so respectful to his fellow combatants. And actually, as he was leaving Appomattox Courthouse, there was a celebrating band playing outside. And he saw them, quieted them down, and then turned to his officers saying, "The war is over. The rebels are our countrymen again." Thank you.
It's actually 7 minutes, 30 seconds.
Are there any questions from you guys? Yes?
Earlier you said that while Lee did own slaves, he didn't approve of slavery. How would those two work? They seem like they would contradict each other.
Yeah, they did contradict each other, and it was a really awkward situation because he actually owned a plantation. His situation was his family had lived in the South for years and years and years. And his family had owned this farm for years, and it was huge, and it was their only way of life, to put it one way. And if Lee were to give that up, he would lose all of his family's pride. He would, it was a matter of pride more so, I think. But yeah, he would have lost everything had he gotten rid of his slaves. And he wanted to, but it was very hard for him to do that, if that makes sense. So it's, I know it's conflicting and it's weird. He did agree with the Emancipation Proclamation, but he didn't know how to implement it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Which was a huge matter of debate, actually, among during the Civil War. So.
Did he give any respect to his slaves, at least?
He was actually very respectful to his slaves. I failed to mention this, but Robert E. Lee is actually one of my favorite people of history. I love him to death. And when I was in 8th grade, I did a Civil War simulation. I actually got to be Robert E. Lee, so it was kind of fun. And in my research of him, so he was very respectful to his slaves. I don't know if he treated them as much as equals. I'd have to double check that, but he was definitely more respectful to his slaves than most people were. So, any other questions?
For what it's worth, Jefferson was also an anti-slave owner.
Yeah.
Similar sort of situations. Please go.
Any more questions? Well, thank you so much.